It's another beautiful day here in the Virgin Islands. We thought we'd bring another episode from our ocean studio regarding what Dowd had to say in his 20th Mizmor. But before we jump into it, I want to draw listeners' attention to a post that I just presented both on X and on Facebook. It certainly appears all evidence is now indicating that Tyler Robinson, the young boy who killed Charlie Kirk, you see, he was not a liberal. He was not as the right-wingers, including Elon Musk and Donald Trump, want to claim that they are leftist Democrats. No, he was the opposite of that. He was extremely right-wing. His parents were Republicans. They were all MAGAs. And as it turned out, Tyler had a very keen fascination with Nick Fuentes. And Nick Fuentes is a very shady character. He's only 5 years older than the 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. But he has quite a resume in a very short period of time. He was one of the instigators in the riots in Charlottesville that turned deadly. He was one of the agitators of the January 6th incursion into the U.S. Capitol, a speaker at the event. He was a guest along with Kanye West as to a private dinner engagement with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. He is a compatriot of Alex Jones. There's very little, actually, that separates Charlie Kirk's rhetoric from Nick Fuentes, other than Nick Fuentes is a bit more extreme. They're both racists, and that needs to be said. Charlie Kirk said very disparaging things about blacks, and he was beginning to say hideous things about Jews. Both were anti-Semites. Although Nick came out of the womb, I think, as an anti-Semite, while Charlie was growing into that role. Both were die-hard MAGAs. Both were huge Trump supporters, never able to get their mind around how they could be Christian, of which they both were Christians, overt Christians, evangelizing Christians, how they could claim to be moral and yet support a man who was a pedophile and a rapist and a convicted criminal. But it didn't seem to bother them any. They were both misogynists. Kirk, in a softer way, he just said that men ought to lord over women and that women are happier and more comfortable when men control their lives. It wasn't a whole lot of difference, actually, between them. But Nick Fuentes decided that Charlie Kirk was a rival because, you see, Nick Fuentes also suffered from an online mindset called incels. Incels are self-acknowledged men who have no relationships with women. They're celibate, but not by choice. They're celibate because they can't get a date. And there's actually a whole culture around people who admit that they want to have a date with women, but they can't get any women to show any interest in them. They're miserable, self-loathing individuals who then turn into misogynists and objectify women and condone raping women, doing everything they can because they have no respect for women. And they ultimately have their enemy, what they call Chads, which are those like Charlie Kirk, who are actually able to find a pretty girl and get married. And so they become the enemies of those who even have the exact same message that they're touting. And this is likely what caused young Tyler Robinson who was a Christian, Mormon, right-wing, Republican, MAGA patriot, to take aim and kill Charlie Kirk. It gets down to that base of problem. But I shared the article mostly so that you would understand the self-loathing subculture of incels, their mindset, so that you would understand the nature of the slightly more extreme version of Charlie Kirk, which is Nick Fuentes and his ilk, Candace Owen, Tucker Carlson now, Alex Jones. And so that you would understand that when MAGAs are now blaming the liberals for killing their buddy, not so. Was somebody ever so slightly right of Charlie Kirk who killed Charlie Kirk? MAGA has a problem. And the problem begins and ends, of course, with Donald Trump. So I wanted to share that with you. I posted it both on Facebook and on X for your edification. And I also want to begin this program by recognizing that Israel is in a horrible spot right at the moment. And they've made their own bed. There is now a very strong movement afoot for the United States to back away from Israel, which, as I've said in our previous program last night, is the strategy of those who actually run the U.S. administration. They want Israel to commit suicide. They're giving all of the bombs possible to Israel for Israel to bomb Gaza so that Israel buries itself and then Israel is no more, and they can turn their attention to the partners that they really want, which would be the Muslim fiefdoms, because they only are interested in money. And Israel is a impediment to cementing better financial relationships with the thugs who run Saudi Arabia and Qatar and United Arab Emirates and Kuwait and Iran and the like. And so by bombing Qatar, likely failing, and by bombing Iran and putting themselves in great jeopardy, and Netanyahu not only pursue a winless war objective, which was to remove Hamas from Gaza, which was impossible, and to have actually made more jihadists while destroying Gaza, and now being forced to feed those who want to kill them, while the world blames Israel for genocide as they feed those who are committed to killing them. It's the most inane situation in the history of war. And Israel has been lured into this, been played by fools, both by the United States and by the Muslims. And right now, it's a dire time. Israel is to the point where it will have no allies. And without allies, in today's world, you can't sustain an economy. You cannot sustain a military. And so Israel is going to be, as we know it, destroyed. That doesn't mean there won't be a remnant of Jews to salvage during Teruah 8 years from now. There will be. It's just that most Jews between now and then will die. I'm not saying that because I want it to happen, obviously. I'm saying that because the prophets have foretold that this is what's going to happen. And as we survey the news, it becomes obvious. Well, on that chipper note, let's return to Mizmor 20. We're on the third statement on this particular program. In the first, it was a designation of Dowd's love for Yahweh, and the second speaks of how Yahweh was going to be there in the time of Israel's troubles, which is approaching. It starts less than a year from now and runs for the next 7 years after that, and how he was going to be there for them and ready for them should they respond to him. It's shub for shub or no shub for you. Shub means to return. God's going to return to Israel the moment Israel returns to him. And that has not yet happened, but that's what was being proclaimed in the second statement, along with the announcement that to enable this to happen, that God has now, would and then, and has now appointed a witness that is whose job it is to reintroduce his name to his people, to reacquaint them with their Messiah and King, the very Son of God and Savior, Dowd, and to explain the timing and what really is required for them to be part of the covenant once again. From there, we move to this. His desire is to remember. His happens to be Yahweh. Dowd is talking about Yahweh. And the verb here is Zakar. Zakar has two meanings. One is to remember, which is what I have it scribed as here. But the other meaning of Zakar is a male. And so it is not only that Yahweh's desire is to remember all of your contributions, as this continues to read with kol minka. Minka is a voluntary offering or sacrifice. But since Zakar also means memorable man, it is Yahweh's desire to remember the man who provided all of these contributions, who offered the sacrifice, providing the gift that has been bestowed on behalf of others. And in this case, they are the same two people that have already been mentioned in this Mizmor, the 20th Psalm. One, of course, is the author, Dowd. He is the most important of them. The second is the witness that Yahweh has committed to provide to reacquaint Yisrael with all they need to know to return to Yahweh. One made the sacrifice on Pesach and Matzah. The other will make his on Teruah. Although both lives are in many ways a celebration of the challenge that's involved in trying to educate, lead, shepherd, awaken, inspire Israelites to respect Yahweh. And that is such a difficult job. The first person who was asked to do it gave up. He asked God to kill him. It was so bad. That was Moshe. And Dowd also gave up. Following the Absalom rebellion, he never recovered. And that was virtually every male in Israel that turned against him. So God's two most effective leaders both gave up on Israel. It's a very difficult job. And God is appreciative of the role that both men have played, and now his witness is playing in carrying the torch. So this is his desire, is to remember and to recall the memorable man and all of your contributions, all of the sacrifices and offerings that you have provided as a gift on behalf of others, along with those of your branch, of your means to ascend, and by way of withdrawal, the acceptable means to rise, of the one accepted and anointed. Pause now and contemplate what this means. Boy, there's just so much meaning in every word. It's such that you could spend days on a single sentence to plumb its full contributions to our understanding about God. So in this case, again, we have Zakar, this memorable man. And memorable men can be both. And their contributions. It is your contributions, but it is, if this is, since Dowd is speaking to Yahweh as him, as his desire to remember this memorable man, then your contributions is probably lowercase. He's speaking likely of the contribution of the one that God has presented as that witness that reintroduces Israel to Dowd as the Messiah and King, as the Savior, as the Son of God. That's really the only way to consider this, because it isn't God that is making a sacrifice or an offering. There's only two people that do it. One is the author and speaking of this psalm, and the other one is his herald, the one who serves in this role by reintroducing him to his people, and then by, as the Adam of Parah, perfecting this mortal remnant of Yisrael upon their return on Teruah in year 2033, year 6,000 Yah. So the only logical assumption here is he's speaking to the contributions of his herald, who is the Adam of Parah, this final day witness. And when he says then of your branch and of your means to ascent and your way of withdrawal, it's this Elah, this acceptable means to rise and ascend. Once again, we're dealing with the exact same thing, because this individual that Dowd has introduced, that is serving in this role at this time to reacquaint Yisrael, this mortal remnant, with Yahweh, and there's a plane that's flying over the house, and Asher is sure as a bird dog that it's her responsibility to chase it away to make sure it doesn't land on the back porch. So excuse the interruption there. Thank you, Asher. This individual is, like Dowd, called a branch. He is a secondary branch, but Choter, which is the term that is used both by Dowd in the 14th Mashal, he's the one who introduces the Choter to the world, and then by Yahshua in the 11th chapter, some 300 years thereafter, that this Choter is a branch. He is a stem. He is a sucker, one who brings new life to the falling trunk and stump and roots that were Israel when Israel was in a productive relationship with Yahweh, that is rooted in all that Dowd represents and that the covenant represents. So when we read a word like this, it is speaking of him, and it is his role in two of the three roles that he plays to facilitate the ascent of the covenant family. And that is because as the final Zeroah, he's the one who's cultivating the harvest of Shabuah and the gleaning of Teruah as the final opportunities to withdraw. And to some extent, this also speaks of his work as the Adam of Parah on Teruah, when that sacrifice purges the adulterous woman that is Yisrael, so that Dowd can marry, be betrothed to Israel, and they can enter the time of Sukkah, this 1,000-year celebration of our return to the Garden of Eden and camping out with God in a vastly elevated status, because they will be royalty related to the king. So they're withdrawn from the world and entered the millennial celebration of our return to Gan Eden. And Olah is often rendered a offering by fire. And of course, fire is symbolic of this same transformation, where fire is the result of taking decaying organic material like our physical bodies, trees and the like, and transforming them into light and energy, which is the very elevated state that we will enjoy when we rise and climb in dimensions, if you will, becoming empowered and enriched by God. And it's the one accepted and anointed. This is not messiah. So he's not claiming that the role that Yada is playing as the Choter here, as the final Zeroah, is equivalent to being messiah, being a Messiah. That's not what the word means. It's dashen is the word, and it's one who is prepared and who prospers and is satisfied and satisfying in the role that he plays. It is the peel and imperfect cohortative, is how it was written, first person expression of volition, which is best attributed to the speaker and thus to Dowd, where the object, which is the the branch that is accomplishing this, has chosen to be put into action by the subject, who is God, with unfolding implications over time. This is precisely what the Choter will do, which is why he said, now pause and contemplate what this means. Now, I'm going to tell you, do you have to understand all of these nuances to benefit from the 20th Mizmor? No. Can you understand the full intent of what Dowd and Yahweh are offering and saying to Israel at this point in time? If you don't understand these things, no. So you don't need to understand it all to benefit somewhat from it, but you'll never understand all that God is trying to convey to us and to his people at this time if you don't. And that's why the encouragement was to pause and contemplate this. So mutually beneficial relationships are obviously, they're reciprocal. Therefore, it's appropriate for Yahweh to contribute on behalf of those who have made contributions to his people. And in this regard, there are two individuals who stand out. Moshe, of course, in the beginning with the Torah, and Dowd, the one who is being designated here, or could be the one who is referenced as the branch, although that isn't the term that would be used if Dowd was to refer to himself as a branch. It would be Shemach, and that wasn't the term that was used. So since there is no reference here to anything that would pertain to Moshe, and Moshe has, was 400 years prior to Dowd, and this is obviously speaking of the last days, based upon what we read previously. The branch stem applies to Dowd's herald. So Yahweh is going to forever cherish Dowd's contributions to the covenant family, and he appreciates it when the Choter reintroduces the world to what David has accomplished. And the means that he has provided to withdraw us from the caustic nature of religion and ascend to heaven is through Dowd's fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim, but nobody knows about it if it were not for the Choter and Dowd's Bashar herald. So in the beloved 23rd Psalm, so that you know, you'll find that same word dashen. And so let's turn to it now, just so that we have our bearings. The author also used this word dashen in conjunction with sa'ar, which is a troubling experience. And remember here, the previous statement said that God was there to be of assistance to his people during this time of sa'ar for Yaakov, Israel. So these things are related. The time of trouble begins just 9 months from now. It says, you have prepared and arranged, putting in place a table before me, conspicuously beyond the presence of my adversaries who would narrow my scope and who would silence me. You have dashen, prepared me, anointed me, if you will, but prepared me not as Messiah, anointed me as Messiah, but you have dashen, anointed me in the sense that you have equipped me and equipped my head with this oil. My cup overfloweth with abundance. Oil obviously representing the Spirit. When dashen is used in the Torah, especially by Moshe, it speaks of prospering. Debatim, Deuteronomy 31:20. But it is also used in Shemot, Exodus 27:3, when describing the construction of a receptacle to collect the ash and the fats of the sacrificial lamb once the inedible parts were burned outside of the tabernacle. That definition does not fit in this context because the remains are without value, leaving us with anointed. Now, that is only to a point. You see, the remains, the ash, of the incinerated parts of the sacrificial lamb of Passover that were not consumed do have value. And that is particularly true when the lamb becomes a bull. And dashen, of course, doesn't distinguish between the two metaphors. When the animal Parah is sacrificed on Teruah, it is the ash that is going to be beneficial in cleansing and purging the religious guilt of the mortal remnant of Israel, so that they can be present when Yahowah and Dowd return and enter the millennial celebration of the Shabbat on Sukkah. And although it sounds a little gruesome, not in Passover. The lamb is sacrificed and prepared for a meal to feed the celebrants of Passover. But in the case of the bull, he is partly eaten as well. It's part of the Feast of the Beast, where Hasatan and his emissary become cannibalistic. And they drink the blood, and not all of it, but they certainly attempt to drink the Adamah Parahs. This is the same man, it's Dowd's herald, the final witness, same fellow being talked about here. They try to drink his blood and eat his flesh. And so it is the same situation. It is that which has been incinerated after that has been done that is going to be used to purge the adulterous woman, consistent with the message of Numbers 19 and Numbers 5. Now, moving on to the next statement, we've long since come to realize that the symbolism of leb, heart, has evolved over the 3,000 years since this was written. In Dowd's mind, he scribed these words when he did so. The heart was not the seat of emotion. It was the place of judgment, the place where observation and experience coalesce with character and intellect to produce the best possible plan of action. One in which the individual was motivated and confident in achieving the ideal result because they had exercised good judgment. Back then, the liver was the seat of emotion. And yeah, we also witness some of that today as well. You call somebody what liver need and other references to liver if you're saying they're emotionally unstable. And we also speak of take it to heart as a means of saying, make the best decision you can on this. So there is some legacy of that even today. So this is what was said net by Dowd. It says, he, speaking of Yahweh, wants to give you that which is in accord with your best judgment, your leb, and fulfill everything you've advised and proposed. This is Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 24. So God stands ready to allow his people to benefit from what his sons are accomplishing. And therefore, Nathan, which means a gift, this is just like in Isaiah 9, Dowd is the son who is given. God is constantly reinforcing the idea that Dowd as his son is offered to the children of Israel as the means to capitalize upon the benefits of the Moed Mikre and of the Bereth covenant. And to a lesser degree, Dowd's herald, this Choter stem, is offering the same thing. He's serving in the same role. And again, it's like what Dowd achieved. Dowd being crucified on Passover would have been nothing but a ghoulish scene if Yahweh hadn't used his body in that way to serve as the fulfillment of the promise that Pesach delivers, which is opening the doorway to life. And that's similar to the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah. It's just a gruesome scene unless Yahweh uses it by releasing the waters that will be mixed with the ash and igniting the flames that purge the remnant of Israel, even bringing the remnant of Israel to Jerusalem to benefit from all of this. It's what God does with these things that matters. And so it is God that is offering even the sacrifices of his co-workers in this regard. So he wants to give you that which is in accord with your best judgment. So you're going to have considered what can be known about Dowd's fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Makorim, or later when we're dealing with Teruah, and understand the metaphors and the symbolism that God is providing and what the result is that God is delivering to benefit from it. You're not going to benefit without having thought it through and made a correct decision, because God is going to fulfill everything that has been proposed to you. And this is because it is his way, and this is Kol Esau, that all of your conclusions and counsel, your thoughts about the entire picture, the way it comes together. Esau is an interesting word because it is the outlier really among the seven spirits that are offered to the Choter. Speaking of that branch, Esau is the one that is the outlier in that regard, and that we see Diat, which speaks of knowledge often. We see Yare, which speaks of respect and reverence often. We see Yahweh's name some 7,000 times. We see Bien many, many hundreds of times, which means understanding. We see Chokmah quite often, particularly in the hand of Dowd, which means intelligence. And even Gabor, which is the other, we see quite often because Dowd is the ultimate Gabor. It means a strong and courageous, confident, consistent, steadfast man who fights for what is right about God. But it says the one that we don't see very often, and it is this ability to be able to frame the issue and present the entire picture from the proper perspective so that this individual can be among the few who, like Dowd, can lay out the entire portrait that God has painted and can explain from beginning to end what God is offering, and to do so in a way that the listener can capitalize on what God is proposing for his people. It is an exceedingly rare commodity. I mean, there's not a lot of people who know how to put the pieces together of a puzzle so that it is understood. So Bien is uncommon. Chokmah is exceedingly uncommon. That's just raw intelligence, processing power, the ability to deduce insights. Knowledge is not all that uncommon. Today, clearly, Yare, respect is, the spirit of Yahweh, exceedingly uncommon. There are very few Gabor in the world today. Most people are really wimpy individuals. They have no backbone. So this particular skill set that's Etzam is maybe the most unique of all of them. And it's one that's offered by the spirit of Yahweh to the Choter. And that the thing that is lacking, and the thing that I've been able to provide through the Yada Yahweh series and through the Yahweh blog, is a comprehensive presentation of all things Yahweh, how we go from the Garden of Eden, out of the garden, and back to the garden over 6,000 years. How Dowd is not only the exemplar of Yisrael, both good and bad, but also the means to engage in the covenant. He is the one who enabled its benefits. He is the former and the returning king. He is the Son of God and our Savior, and therefore Jesus could not have existed. He is the returning Messiah, therefore Bar Kokhba was a complete and utter fraud. It's understanding things like Yahweh's name and his timeline so that you would know when everything in the past took place and where and why. And you will understand why Shabuah has two phases, 2026, 2027, why Teruah is fulfilled as it is, when it is, where it is, and by whom, and who's the master of ceremonies, and why that individual was chosen, and what it leads to on Kippurim. No one has ever put these pieces together previously. And yet they're essential today. You can't get there. You can't go from being obstructionist, obstinate, defiant, embittered, estranged, azab, separated Israel from God, to embracing Yahweh by name, embracing Dowd as the Son of God and your Savior, the returning Messiah and King, and recognize when these events are going to take place and how rough it's going to be on Jews between now and then, without all of this being put together for you. And so this word is a story in and of itself, as is presented in Mizmor Lyrics to Sing, Psalm 24. So this is either wonderful or terrible, depending on how accurate our thinking and our conclusions are, how well informed we are, how we have exercised judgment regarding what you have just heard. You know, it's addressing Dowd's herald and addressing Dowd, but Dowd is the speaker here. And Yahweh is affirming that he concurs with Dowd's thinking on this matter of fulfilling Chag Matzah and also of Kippurim, as well as recognizing the role that Dowd's herald, the lesser luminary, will play in reacquainting this remnant of Yisrael with the importance of these things and these decisions. The son proposed this plan to God that he fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, and then quickly received his father's support. We've gone over how Dowd came to realize that it was the right thing for him to do, and that he, in fact, could come back in a second of third lives to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, and why it was in Yahweh's interest, Israel's interest, and his interest to do so. And then we determined why God recognized that it was indeed in his son's best interest, and that he would support his son enduring crucifixion and going into hell during Matzah, because those 2 days would pay such enduring dividends for everyone going forward, that it was the best possible choice to allow his son to do as he had decided. And again, you are listening to the only person who has ever been able to figure this out, to ascertain how Dowd determined that he should volunteer, to appreciate why Dowd realized that it was in his best interest to do so, and why Yahweh accepted the plan and then empowered it, and how it was carried out thereafter. And it is the single greatest discovery in human history. Well, it's the greatest discovery in human history if you have any interest in extending your history beyond your mortal days, and certainly beyond 8 years from now, because it will be the only way to live beyond 8 years from now. Indeed, there is only one way to benefit from this extraordinarily positive opportunity, and that is to be observant, to closely examine and carefully consider everything Father and Son have revealed, particularly in this Mizmor, and particularly really in the 89th as well, even the 22nd, the 113th, the 103rd, the 119th, the 19th, the 1st, the 2nd, the 23rd. It goes on, doesn't it? We need to exercise good judgment about what our king revealed to us. Normally, people listen to the edicts of their king. It's a shame that Israel has chosen not to do so. Oh, I know they turn Dowd's songs into prayers, but they don't have a clue as to what he actually said, why he said it, what it means, how to apply it, who he actually is. Now, so that we're on the same page, there are 4 reasons that I was led to present Mizmor 20 before commencing with our review of Psalms 6 and 7, since we have already made our way through 1 through 5. The first is that it was written to enlighten us about what to expect from Yahweh during the time of Jacob's troubles. And they are fast approaching. So you have very little time to process this information. The second is the use of Yeshua, salvation, in context with its root, Yasha, to save and deliver. The third is Dagal, to look at and to celebrate a conspicuous banner, because that is what God has promised to raise for you at this time. And fourth, the inclusion of Mashiach, anointed Messiah, which we have already considered in this psalm. And that, of course, is Dowd and David. So in the next 2 statements, we will find all 4 of these words. It is worth our investigation of this Mizmor for that alone. And look at the treasures we have already received. It's with God, between the Torah, the prophets, and the Psalms, we have the greatest treasure ever considered. We are being given treasure that buys the entire universe, that acquires eternal life, that derives perfection. You know, it's like the genie, where you find the genie, you rub the bottle, and you get 3 wishes, and you better be careful with your 3 wishes, because that genie, he's a clever lad. Well, in this case, you get a treasure that gives you every wish you could possibly conceive, and for all time. And even the guidance on how to properly frame that question so that you get the most out of every wish, even though the wishes are unlimited. There's just nothing that compares to it in terms of enrichment. Yes, I am the richest man in the world because I get to spend my day in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms of Yahweh, and I am enriched by them. Well, Dowd is encouraging everyone listening to him, and that would be you listening to me speak of him, to run on, to shout for joy, to be Yeshua, Ata, in your salvation. It is an expression of the benevolent idea that Dowd, like every covenant member, celebrates the addition of each soul to the covenant family, because they are very rare and very precious. It's not like God is trying to maximize the number of souls. It's not that at all. It's just that each soul who qualifies based on their aptitude, their attitude, their willingness to come to know and understand and then accept and then capitalize upon and then pursue the very testimony of Yahweh, pursuant to the Bereth covenant, pursuant to the Moed Mikre, just grow exponentially. And it's a great celebration of life with each addition to the family. Now, this expression of joy is not based upon a nebulous religious notion of popular belief, but instead, in the name of our God, Yahweh, and on behalf of those who decall, who choose of your own volition to actually observe, closely examine, and carefully consider all of the conspicuous pronouncements on the banner, which has been raised in this program on the 35 books of Yada Yahweh, and will be raised in the banner that flies over the 2 witnesses and the Temple Mount during the last 3.5 years of the time of trouble. And it is an unfolding message to God's people. So up to this point, we have been, uncertain as to whether this Mizmor has been. I don't think we've been uncertain, but we've certainly talked about the possibilities as to who Dowd is addressing when he's speaking to his father, and whether or not Dowd is addressing himself or the witness who is devoted to increasing Israel's knowledge of him. And obviously, when you just look at the pronouns and what is said, it's clearly, since this is Dowd speaking and he's speaking of another, it is of the one who is the lesser luminary who serves to reflect the greater luminary's light as the moon reflects the sun's brilliance, and who is the herald to the king, the Choter to the Shemach, is what we are witnessing here, and it should be obvious. Well, now based upon the use of the first person plural, it appears to be both revealing that Yahweh is as interested in what Dowd has accomplished as he is in informing the Israelites about it, which means it's still about the Bashar Herald speaking of what his king has achieved. We want to shout for joy, run on. It is our desire to sing blissfully, rejoicing, written in the Peel, imperfect, cohortative, first person plural, over your salvation, Ba Yeshua Ata, and your deliverance, your welfare, your freedom, and your victory, in the name of our God, by conspicuously uplifting a banner, Degal, by what we readily point out and what we celebrate, upholding in the sight of the people as our sign and ensign, recognizing the unfolding implications of this message throughout time. Yahweh wants to satisfy and fulfill all of your requests and expectations, your inquiries, and your questions. Mizmor, lyric to be sung, Psalm 25. I'm smiling because, remember, I used the metaphor of rubbing the genie bottle, and you get your three wishes, and you better choose them well, because the genie is going to play games on you and try to trick you out of your wishes. And here what we find is that indeed I was right. Yahweh is providing every request. He is making sure that our inquiries, our questions, our desires, our expectations, every one of our petitions and appeals is met and fulfilled. It is an unlimited source of well-being and prosperity, of gifts from God. So here we have, as I had promised, so much that is insightful pursuant to this. Our salvation was hard won. Dowd described it in first person in the 22nd and again in the 88th Mizmor, where he, as the Passover lamb, his Bashar body, was crucified by the beast of Rome, opening the doorway to life. And then on Matzah, Dowd's nefesh soul carried our political and religious guilt into Sheol, depositing it there, never to be seen again. But the fact that he did it, and then after accomplishing that, returned to Yahweh, the Bakor fulfilling Bakurim, firstborn children, we are enormously benefited. We have been given the greatest gift in the universe. And for that, we should shout for joy. And we do so in the name of our God, Yahweh, God's one and only name. We do so conspicuously, and we do so uplifting all that we know in the most effective form, which today that banner is flown on the website at yahowah.com, on X, on so many of the YouTube channels, like Yahweh's blog, like Yada Yahweh, like Shamar Ameth. There are so many places where this is being conveyed, on the Craig Wynn X account as well as the Craig Wynn Facebook account. These are all places where God's testimony is being conspicuously lifted up, a banner for the world to see. pick up your phone. You can venture through all that we have shared on Facebook, on X, on any one of the 5 YouTube channels, on Rumble. It's all there for you on the website at yahowah.com now, with the books that you almost feel like you're holding in your hands with page turning, and so many wonderful bookmarks and other capabilities. In fact, I talked with Joe this morning. We will be continuing to work together to add and augment that site. Yahweh wants to satisfy and fulfill, Male. His desire and his choice, God's will, is to provide for our every request, our every expectation, our every question. He's there to support everything we need. What a father. What a gift. Psalm 25. Now, every reconciled soul is, of course, cause for celebration. So whether this is Father and Son, or Messiah and his foremost messenger, well, either way, we are jubilantly singing. And there really isn't that much difference, truthfully. Well, there's a gargantuan difference between Dowd and his herald. Dowd is king. He is the firstborn son of God. He is the chosen one. He is our Messiah. He is the one who is returning as all things pertaining to God's influence. He is the one who is brilliant as the sun. He is the greater luminary. He is all things spectacular. But his message, what he's offering, really isn't any different than what his herald is offering. His herald is reflecting what he has done. The lesser luminary is reflecting the greater luminary's brilliance, see not? Or both serving the will of Yahweh on behalf of Yehudim. What really is the difference in any one of those things? Dowd provided salvation by fulfilling Pesach and Matzah. No one would know it if the heralds didn't point it out. They both play a role. And the role that they play is to serve collaboratively on behalf of Yahweh, to an extent that all of those who will make a contribution because of their attitudes and aptitudes and the decisions that they have made throughout eternity in the covenant family will know what they need to know to be part of it. Yahshua has referenced this same banner, by the way, and I think most of you know it. In association with the Choter, it's in Isaiah 11. It's called a nesh, a banner or sign. Dowd has chosen Dagal to describe the same sign or banner, revealing that either Father and Son and or Messiah and his messenger will be lifting it up for all to see. I personally think that this banner will fly forevermore. I think that the first aspects of it are consistent with what Dowd's son Solomon had to say on the Sermon on the Mount, when on a teruah he explained that there would be a nakri, an observant foreigner, and that it was essential for Israel to read and to listen to all he had to say and then act upon it, and that it would be as if his words and message would literally come out of the sky, come out of the heavens. And so in a very real way, it was presented at that time. Dowd is presenting it, of course, a generation before his son would speak of it. And then Yahshua took the next step and described it even more completely. It is also in the prophet Yoel, who speaks of this banner. Zakar does as well, and of it being unfurled for all Israel to see. And because it begins preceding the time of trouble and then takes us all the way through to the end and then serves a function of education thereafter, there's every reason to see that its first glimmerings are on the Yada yahowah.com website with all of the books, and now on the revised yahowah.com website with the integration of the Yahweh blog and the library of books, and that it is now being presented on X and on Facebook and on YouTube, and that God will eventually augment all of that and lift it up above the Temple Mount. But, as we go into the millennial Shabbat and God writes his Torah instructions inside of us, there's still going to be teachers that are going to explain it. And, the best way to do that is to have a communication mechanism that all people around the world can learn from simultaneously. And so I think this banner is going to be an enduring part of that education process as we go forward. So whether it's Malach messengers that are lifting it up, whether it's suspended by God himself for all to see, the fact is that Yahweh has a major role in this. He is participating in it. This is his sign. And it was largely written by his Choter. And this banner speaks of Dowd and of Yahweh and of Yehudim and of Yisrael and of the Moadim and of the Bereth. And every word leads to coming back home, accepting Yahweh as our God, and of embracing our King of salvation for the people. Yahweh's commitment to satisfying our requests by fulfilling our expectations is really an interesting thought, because God's not asking us at any time to pray to him or make a pleading with him. He's just telling us that what he's going to offer through Dowd's fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, Makorim, opening the doorway to life, perfecting our souls by carrying away our guilt, adopting us into the covenant family, enriching and empowering us, inviting us back into the conditions experienced in Eden, that those things are going to so far exceed our expectations that our every question is going to be answered, that our every expectation will be fulfilled abundantly, and that we will lack for nothing. That is what he's saying. And it is marvelous, is it not? And it was written in the name of Yahweh to those who wish to consider what it will be conspicuously upheld, both in the Yada Yahweh series and on the Yahweh blog, and thereafter by Elia, and then the Messiah himself upon his return. The words written on that sign will have come from Dowd, just as I'm sharing now Dowd's words and Yada Yahweh. And so they are in both places. It's just like I've said from the beginning, there's really little that distinguishes between the message of Dowd and the message of his herald Yada, and the message of Yahweh. The message of Yahweh was the message of Dowd, is the message of Yada. And therefore, it's Dowd's words that are found in Yada Yahweh, which become the nefesh. And Dowd's words were the words of God. The flow of the sentence is also interesting in that the fulfillment of our requests and expectations follows the celebration of our salvation, of our deliverance. And it's actually deliverance is the basis of Yeshua, which means that we are delivered from harm's way. We're delivered from death. We're delivered from our prior guilt. We are delivered unto God. So this isn't God granting the temporal and mundane prayer requests in the here and now, but instead promoting a life with him in the hereafter that will be extraordinarily fulfilling. This serves as an affirmation that we have been right all along. Our salvation is far less appealing than the prospect of exploring the universe with its creator, and with our Heavenly Father enriching, empowering, and enlightening us in every possible way, every step along the way. So speaking of this very moment when his people are being saved by observing the words on the banner that the author of this song has so beautifully contributed, with it now being unfurled as the beneficiaries celebrate their most hopeful desires, all of their questions answered, every wish fulfilled. The beloved Son continues. Concurrently now, I realize at this time, Yada, that surely Yahweh will deliver at this moment to liberate and save Yasha, his anointed Messiah. He has chosen to answer and to respond through him from his set-apart spiritual realm in the heavens through the Gabora. That's the feminine characteristics of this very capable and courageous individual, the most prominent and powerful of leaders who isn't afraid to fight for what is right, of his right hand, saving and delivering. Psalm 26. And once again here, I think that you've probably already gotten the message. This is speaking of Dowd, but of Dowd being delivered at a time that his herald has delivered the message. That while Dowd is the right hand of Yahweh, his herald Yada is his right hand. It is why Yada is mentioned in the midst of this. There is, the message here is that there really is no difference between the word of Yahweh, the message and the Psalms of Dowd, and the presentation of them by Yada. Same God, same message, same Savior, same covenant, same Torah teaching, same prophetic references, same audience. So concurrently now, at this time, what time is this? He's been talking all the way through about what you would consider to be the last days. That is the time that he is discussing. And he says, so currently now, at this time, I realize at this moment, Yada. I recognize Yada. I appreciate Yada. I acknowledge Yada. That surely, verifiably, indeed, confidently, Yahweh will deliver at this moment to liberate and save through his anointed Messiah. You see, this, even though I know it sounds like I'm a broken record here, doesn't it? But I don't know of any other way to deal with this. Yahweh is delivering Shabuah and the harvest of Teruah by way of Dowd having fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim. However, there isn't a single person on earth that would have known about it, who would have capitalized on it, who would have been there and been a part of the harvest of Shabuah or the gleaning of Teruah, had it not been for this Choter, for Yada. Not a soul, not one. There wouldn't have been a single person who capitalized on either had it not been for Yada. And Dowd recognizes it. And so it is through the Messiah and his sacrifice during Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim, as he fulfilled the Chag Matzah in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, that God can deliver on the promise of Shabuah and Teruah. And the Messiah is returning and will be embraced by Yisrael, being delivered to God's people, following his herald's sacrifice as the Adam of Parah on Teruah. This is all intertwined. God's prophecy, God's plan, God's sons, God's message, his beloved Son, our Messiah, our King, the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, Bekurim, Shabuah, Teruah, and Kippurim, leading to Sukkah. It is all one integrated message. And this is the first time that it has all been put together. So it is properly framed so that you can look at it from the appropriate vantage point. So that you will recognize that the anointed Messiah is Dowd David, not Bar Kokhba, not Jesus, not Muhammad, but Dowd David. And it's not just that Dowd is the Messiah, it's that Dowd is the Yasha. He's the Savior. He's the one who performed on our behalf in 33 CE by being crucified by the Romans and then carrying our guilt into Sheol on Matzah so that we could be part of the covenant family cum Bokorim and therefore capitalize on the Bokorim harvest of Shabuah and the gleaning of olives on Teruah, so that there will be a mortal remnant that the Adamah Parah can serve on Teruah, so that Dowd can return as the Messiah and King on Kippurim. This is the essential message of the 20th Mizmor, and it is what God is conveying to his people. Every answer is being delivered. The means to respond is all being laid out for you. Anahu. It is God's desire to consistently sing along with him, to reply by continually and literally declaring the information needed to answer these important questions. And you can make this him the Messiah, and that's my preference, that God is going to answer and respond through him because he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bokorim, because he's coming back as our king forevermore. Or you can say that God is making him known and delivering him because of the work of his herald and what has been accomplished through the lesser luminary, bringing our attention to the greater luminary. And all of this is being orchestrated out of the set-apart spiritual realm in the heavens, which is where God is now, because he is not engaged with his people. He is working through Dowd's herald at this point, Yada, the Adamah Parah, the Choter, just as he worked through Dowd 2,000 years ago and 3,000 years ago. It is God's chosen approach, but one that he really had no other option but to choose, because Yisrael said they didn't ever want to see him or hear from him again, which means the only way for God to communicate and interact with his people would be through chosen implements like Moshe, Shamuel, Dowd, the great prophets like Yashayah, Yirmiyah, Zakar, and then through his final witness, the Choter, Yada. And so God is orchestrating all of this from the set-apart spiritual realm and through the Geborah. The Geborah is the most empowering term of the seven spirits offered to the Choter. So now we see yet another one in this Mizmor. It is written in the feminine, not because God's witness is a woman, but because it is afforded to the Choter by way of the Ruach, the spirit, and Ruach in Hebrew is a feminine term, just like Nefesh, soul, is a feminine term in Hebrew. It doesn't mean that the soul of a man makes the man a woman. It's just that that's the nature of Hebrew grammar. When we see it, Gabor versus Geborah, we are attuned to, well, we saw Geborah versus Gabor speak of a man who is the Choter when the spirit of Yahweh, the Ruach of Yahweh, conveyed it to him. And therefore, that's the reason it was written in this way at this moment. And this Geborah is this most courageous man of God, and he has to be. He has to be exceedingly steadfast and tough. He has to be a fighter. He has to be resilient. He has to be strong. Because if he isn't, then the same thing would happen that happened with Moshe and Dowd before him. Two exceedingly great men. Two of the greatest men who have ever lived. Maybe the two, in fact, I would say the greatest two men who have ever lived. And yet they gave up. Can't give up this time. We have to see it through. And so it's going to take the Geborah of Yahweh's spirit to enable this. And that is how this message is being delivered. Through the forcefulness, through the power, through the courage, through the confidence of Yahweh's Ruach delivering Geborah to Yada. Also that we fight on behalf of his right hand, Dowd is Yahweh's right hand, and Yada is Dowd's right hand. All to save and to deliver, to Yasha, to rescue, to remove all that is dangerous. You see, Dowd delivered our guilt to Sheol so that it would never be seen again, which delivers us from the consequence of what we have done that is inappropriate. So we're delivered, and our guilt is delivered to a place that is inaccessible, rendering us perfect in God's eyes so that we actually don't have to be saved because there's no trial, there's no guilt. We just appear perfect in God's eyes, and we're enriched and empowered by Him. We're part of the covenant family. It is the ideal scenario. And it's not only that Dowd's right hand is delivered, and that Dowd as the right hand of God will be delivered on Kippurim, and that both are delivering this message, and both are delivering the result, which is to separate God's people from their religious guilt. All of these things are happening together and between them and on behalf of Yahweh. So I think we'll return to this particular statement, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 26, and what we can glean from it as we begin our next program in this, the Ocean Studio of the Yahweh blog. It has been really just a gorgeous day, has it not, with the lovely breezes and the white clouds that are dancing in the sky, the beauty of the sea behind us, and this island paradise. And so I thank you so much for being part of this program and listening and experiencing all that Father have to say and to offer at this time and on your behalf. Happy Shabbat to one and all.